While the Motown machine projected unity, harmony, and family to the public, the reality behind the scenes was far more intense. Beneath the polished performances, matching outfits, and synchronized smiles, a fierce rivalry was brewing between two of the label's most powerful female groups. This was friendly competition, yes, but this was also a high-stakes battle for dominance, for the best songs, for prime stage time, radio play, Berry Gordy's approval, and ultimately the coveted crown of Motown's leading ladies. Every rehearsal, every studio session, every television appearance was another opportunity to outshine the other. These women were not just entertainers. They were warriors on the front line of soul music's golden era. At the heart of this rivalry was something deeper than ambition. It was about legacy. Whoever came out on top wouldn't just be another girl group. They'd be remembered as the voice of a generation, the face of Motown, and the blueprint for every female act that followed. But here's the thing. This tension didn't tear them down, it made them better. The hunger to lead pushed each group to dig deeper, sing harder, and elevate their artistry to new heights. The studio became a battleground where melodies were weapons and harmonies were shields. Producers, writers, and musicians could feel the fire, and it lit up every record they made. And the results were timeless hits that still resonate to this day. Songs that broke records, topped charts, and became the soundtrack to countless lives. Songs that were catchy. Every note was a declaration that said we belong at the top. And through this competitive fire, they didn't just define Motown, they helped cement their musical footprints through time. An era of style, soul, and sisterhood, one where grace met grit and the spotlight was earned, not given. And in the end, both groups would walk away as legends, forever etched into music history. Hey, yo, what's going on, guys? This is Kanoa Speaks. We diving into the archives to bring you the moments from history that shaped the R&B and soul genres. Let's set the scene. In the early 1960s, Motown Records was a growing force in the music industry, and Berry Gordy was building a roster of stars who would soon dominate the charts. Among the most promising acts were two girl groups with very different energies, the Supremes and Martha and the Vandellas. Both groups came from Detroit and both were molded into the Motown tradition. Polished vocals, synchronized choreography, sharp outfits, and the Motown sound driving their records. But that's where their similarities really ended. Martha and the Vandellas, led by the powerhouse voice of Martha Reeves, were raw, soulful, and bold. Their sound had gospel roots and street energy. When you heard them sing Heat Wave or Dancing in the Street, it felt urgent. It felt like a party breaking out on your block. On the flip side, the Supremes had a smoother, more refined vibe. With Diana Ross eventually stepping into the lead, their sound became elegant, pop-driven, and perfectly tailored for crossover appeal. Songs like Where Did Our Love Go and Baby Love felt polished and controlled, made for the radio, made for the mainstream. At the start, though, it was Martha and the Vandellas who broke out first. They scored early hits and became known for their electrifying live performances. The Supremes, by contrast, were really struggling at this time. In fact, they had earned the name the No-Hit Supremes around the studio because of their repeated failures to land a chart topper. But everything changed in 1964 when Holland Dozier Holland, Motown's legendary songwriting and production trio, delivered Where Did Our Love Go to the Supremes. The song was originally intended for the Vandellas, but they passed on it, and the Supremes got their shot and made history with the song that hit #1, and suddenly the Supremes were the group to watch. And from that moment on, the competition was fierce. Behind the scenes, tension simmered. Both groups knew they were vying for the same resources: songs, promotion, television spots, and even Gordy's personal favor. At Motown, success was often tied to who got the hottest material and the biggest push from the front office. And once the Supremes began their streak of #1 hits, it became clear that the balance of power was shifting. Martha and the Vandellas were still respected, still beloved, but they were no longer the top girl group at Motown. That title now belonged to Diana Ross and her Supremes. And with each new hit, the gap widened. But this wasn't about one group rising and the other group falling. It was the beginning of a deeper, more layered rivalry, one fueled by talent, ambition, and the high-stakes nature of the Motown machine. As both groups gained traction in the mid-1960s, their differences began to crystallize, not just in terms of success, but in how they represented two distinct sides of Motown's artistic vision. It was a clash of image, attitude, and sound. Martha and the Vandellas embodied raw soul. Their music was rhythm-heavy, gospel-esque, and built for the dance floor. They didn't just sing love songs, they roared them. With Martha Reeves' bold, brassy vocals leading the charge, their songs had heat and urgency. Their sound connected deeply with black audiences and reflected the heartbeat of the streets, the civil rights era, and the everyday struggles of working-class folks. Their style matched the sound, vibrant, expressive, and unfiltered. Martha and the girls didn't shrink themselves. They were loud, proud, and confident, whether performing in the South or on the Ed Sullivan stage. To many fans, they represented authenticity. They didn't try to change who they were to fit an industry mold. The Supremes, meanwhile, became the faces of the Motown crossover ambition. Once Diana Ross took the lead and Maxine Powell's charm school lessons took full effect, the Supremes were transformed into high glamour stars. Their gowns sparkled, their movements were precise, and their vocals were clean, controlled, and accessible. Their polished look and softer sound made them perfect for white audiences, and Berry Gordy knew this. He made the Supremes a priority, grooming them not just as singers but as ambassadors for Motown to the world. They appeared on national television frequently, rubbing shoulders with Hollywood elites. Their pop appeal was undeniable, but it came at a cost. To many inside Motown and among the fan base, the Supremes' success felt like it was a signal that this is what Motown wanted to promote. Some saw it as a compromise, moving away from the soul grit of acts like the Vandellas in favor of a more palatable image, and that tension created real friction. Behind closed doors, Martha Reeves would later admit that she felt that her group was often sidelined, passed over for songs or opportunities that instead went to the Supremes. Whether real or perceived, this dynamic created a sense of favoritism, and the Supremes, for all their charm and polish, began to draw envy, frustration, and even quiet resentment from their label mates. But this stylistic divide, the soulful edge of the Vandellas versus the refined shimmer of the Supremes, was also what made Motown so powerful. It offered two parallel expressions of black womanhood, artistry, and power. The competition wasn't just internal, it played out on stage as well, on the charts and in the hearts of fans everywhere. Inside Hitsville, USA, competition was part of the culture. Motown's artists were constantly striving to outdo one another. But for the Supremes and Martha and the Vandellas, the stakes were even higher. Because at Motown, who got the hit songs could make or break a career. And both groups were locked in a quiet war for access to the label's best material. At the center of this conflict was Holland Dozier Holland, the powerhouse songwriting and production trio responsible for many of Motown's biggest hits. They had originally worked closely with both groups, but as the Supremes began racking up #1 records, they became more and more tethered to Diana Ross and company. The turning point came when Where Did Our Love Go, a song originally intended for the Vandellas, was reassigned to the Supremes. Martha reportedly didn't care for the track and passed on it, but when the Supremes cut it, the song catapulted them from obscurity into stardom. That moment shifted the energy in the building. Holland Dozier Holland began prioritizing the Supremes and tailored songs to Diana's voice, crafting hooks for mass appeal and helping the group chart a course toward pop dominance. Meanwhile, the Vandellas, despite their proven talent and success, increasingly found themselves on the outside looking in. They still received quality songs, but rarely the label's very best. Martha Reeves later admitted that it felt like a battle to even get attention in the studio. The creative resources from the producers to the promotion team were being pulled towards what Motown saw as their flagship act. And it wasn't just Holland Dozier Holland. Berry Gordy himself played a critical role. As his personal and professional relationship with Diana Ross deepened, so did his investment in the Supremes. He made it clear to the entire Motown staff that Diana was to be treated as a priority. That meant earlier studio time, better wardrobe, bigger budgets, and eventually solo aspirations. For the Vandellas, it felt like their moment in the sun was being slowly eclipsed. This competition wasn't fueled by hatred or sabotage, it was just business. But it left an emotional bruise. Martha Reeves, a gifted singer with leadership and presence and charisma, often felt her group was being edged out, not because of the lack of talent, but because of the strategic decisions beyond their control. Still though, the Vandellas fought back the only way they knew how, by putting out great music. Nowhere to Run, I'm Ready for Love, and Jimmy Mack were all undeniable. They proved that even without Motown's full backing, they could still compete at the highest level. Yet behind the walls of Studio A, the mood was shifting. It was clear that Motown was choosing a queen, and the Vandellas, once contenders for the throne, were now being treated more like second-tier royalty. And the fallout would leave a lasting mark on both groups, shaping how they remembered their time in Motown long after the final records were cut. By the late 1960s, the Supremes had become a pop culture phenomenon. They weren't just chart toppers. They were global icons, representing Motown on some of the biggest stages in the world. From Ed Sullivan to the Copacabana, they were headlining venues that most black artists of their era never got close to. And as their star power grew, so did the internal tensions. Not just within the Motown building, but within the groups themselves. And the Vandellas were watching it all unfold. They had been the label's first breakout girl group, the ones who helped solidify Motown's sound and energy in the early 1960s. But now they were being overshadowed. Not because they were losing their touch, but because Motown had shifted its focus. Media appearances, promotional budgets, primetime TV gigs, all increasingly leaned towards the Supremes. For Martha Reeves, this was personal and professional. She had once been the secretary in the A&R department, working under Mickey Stevenson before stepping into the spotlight. She paid her dues, and yet even with hit after hit, her group was consistently placed behind the Supremes, who were now being rebranded as Diana Ross and the Supremes, a move that sparked controversy even within the group itself. The internal dynamics with both groups were also reaching a boiling point. For the Supremes, Diana Ross's rising solo ambitions combined with Berry Gordy's heavy backing created resentment from group members Mary Wilson and Cindy Birdsong. Florence Ballard, a founding member, had already been pushed out, largely due to conflicts over Ross's growing dominance and the group's changing direction. In the Vandellas camp, the frustrations were quieter but no less real. The group had been through lineup changes too, and while Martha Reeves remained the face and the voice, the lack of consistent support from the label made it difficult to sustain momentum. Behind the curtain, Martha was also struggling with exhaustion and health issues, made worse by a grueling tour schedule and limited resources compared to the attention lavished on the Supremes. There were no public feuds, no dramatic blowouts, but the rivalry between these two groups remained mostly unspoken, fueled more by circumstance than direct conflict. But behind the smiles and synchronized dance steps, there was a very real sense of frustration, a feel of being undervalued in the system they helped build. Fame had brought them validation, but it also brought strain. The Supremes were battling among themselves for control of their destiny, while the Vandellas were battling to keep their place in the spotlight. And as the 1960s gave way to a new era, both groups were nearing major crossroads. The rivalry that once pushed both to deliver greatness was now revealing the cost of competition in an industry that demanded perfection, but didn't always reward loyalty. Time has a way of reshaping stories, and as the years passed, the rivalry between the Supremes and Martha and the Vandellas came to be seen not just as competition, but as a powerful reflection of what it meant to be a black woman back then in the industry during the 1960s. Both groups left an indelible mark, not only on Motown, but on pop culture as a whole. The Supremes scored 12 #1 hits, broke racial barriers on television and in live venues, and showed the world that black artists could be mainstream superstars. This success paved the way for countless acts to follow, not just in music, but in fashion, film, and business. But their story was also one of internal struggle and sacrifice. Florence Ballard's tragic exit and later passing remains one of Motown's most haunting chapters. Mary Wilson, who stayed in the group until the very end, later dedicated much of her life to preserving their history, ensuring the world understood the full depth of what the Supremes endured and accomplished. Martha and the Vandellas, though not as widely celebrated in mainstream pop culture, left a different kind of legacy, one built on grit, soul, and social resonance. Their songs became the anthems of joy and protest alike. Dancing in the Street in particular took on a deeper meaning during the civil rights movement, often interpreted as a coded call to action. Their performances were electric, and Martha Reeves, with her church-trained voice and undeniable presence, remained one of Motown's most versatile vocalists. As Motown historians and fans began to look back, many started to challenge the old narratives. Yes, the Supremes were the label's flagship group, but the Vandellas were its soul. The impact wasn't always reflected in the sales charts, but it was deeply felt in the hearts of listeners and the spirit of the era. And in later interviews, both Martha Reeves and Mary Wilson expressed mutual respect for each other's journey. They acknowledged the competition, but also recognized that they were all trying to survive, thrive, and excel within a system that had often pitted them against one another. The rivalry may have been real, but so was the shared experiences of being black women navigating fame, pressures, and limited control over their artistry. Today, both groups are enshrined in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and their music continues to be sampled, studied, and celebrated. And their influence lives on in every girl group, R&B singer, and pop diva that followed. The rivalry between the Supremes and Martha and the Vandellas represented two different paths, one polished in pop and the other soulful and streetwise. And together, they helped shape the golden age of Motown. But check this out. The Funk Brothers laid down the grooves behind nearly every Motown hit in the 1960s. Click here to watch this video now, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.